The true story behind The Wizard of Oz.
It had another meaning woven into the story itself.
A record-breaking road trip.
They had their eye on the prize. They couldn't stop.
And monsters under the metropolis.
This wasn't just a fairy tale. This may actually have some truth to it.
Deep in the vaults of the world's greatest institutions lie extraordinary relics, tales of intrigue and wonder, and secrets waiting to be revealed.
These are the mysteries at the museum.
New York, New York. The Metropolitan Transit Authority makes sure the Big Apple's famous subways run smoothly for more than 5 million riders every day. But it also operates the MTA Arts and Design Program, which turns stations into underground art galleries. At the West 14th Street stop is the Life Underground series. Created by artist Tom Otterness, its whimsical sculptures celebrate the city's quirkiness. But there's one piece that stands out, even though it barely rises above most New Yorkers' ankles.
It's roughly 3 feet by 2 feet, made entirely of bronze. It's a typical manhole we would see anywhere in New York City. Coming up from underneath is a creature from below, hoping to snatch a commuter and eat them for dinner.
This unusual work appears to portray a terrifying reptile lurking beneath New York's streets. But according to local writer Thomas Hines, this seemingly fantastical scenario might have some basis in fact.
In New York City, people had heard about and whispered about creatures living in the sewers, but this legend may actually have some truth to it.
So are there really monsters under this metropolis? The legend begins in the winter of 1935. New York City is awash with reports of a giant creature blocking a sewer drain in Harlem.
3 teenagers were shoveling snow into a manhole and said they saw some thrashing about down there. It was a 7-foot alligator.
But with no photos to prove it, the alleged sighting goes down in history as just another urban legend. But then, in 1959, a veteran city worker named Teddy May gives an interview to a local journalist and breathes new life into the story.
Teddy May was this larger-than-life figure. He claimed to know every inch of New York City sewers.
Teddy's intricate knowledge of the city's labyrinthine underbelly has earned him the nickname King of the Sewers.
Teddy was saying, I was told by my men that there were alligators in the sewers.
Believing the guys were drinking on the job, he claims he went into the sewer to prove them wrong. But then, as he shined a light into one of the smaller tunnels, he noticed something moving in the shallow waters. And that's when he saw them.
He sees this congregation of alligators, dozens of them, and he couldn't believe it.
With a possible infestation on his hands, Teddy claims he took immediate action.
As legend has it, he rounded up his best men with shotguns and flashlights, and he killed them then and there.
In the wake of Teddy's incredible story, more and more reports emerge of wily reptiles roaming the city's sewers.
Everybody starts hearing that underneath the streets in the sewers, there are man-eating predators willing to snatch you up and take you home for dinner.
Despite the rumors, no one is able to provide proof that the stories are anything more than tall tales. But in 2010, everything changes. Queens, New York. Police at a local precinct receive a series of frightened calls from area residents.
Some neighbors reported seeing an alligator emerge on the streets from the sewers.
An officer races to the scene, and when he arrives, he is greeted by a stunning sight. There's an actual alligator on the streets of New York.
It was there. There was no doubt about it. This alligator had come onto the street from the sewers.
But this is no raging beast. In fact, it's only 18 inches long.
I think it was sort of a funny moment for anybody who'd been following this alligators in the sewer legend.
The reptile is captured by police and taken to an animal sanctuary. But the incident fuels a wave of tabloid coverage, with headlines declaring the long-standing rumors of alligators in the sewers to finally have been proven true. So, how did a creature like this end up in New York sewers in the first place?
One theory is that they were kept as pets in people's homes. They got too big, Dad flushed them down the toilet. And another theory that they were transported on cruisers coming up from Florida and hopped off and swam into the sewers.
Whatever the truth, it seems that the legend of alligators in the sewers will live on. And today, in New York City's West 14th Street subway station, a bronze reptile emerging from under a manhole cover playfully depicts one of the Big Apple's most unlikely residents. San Diego, California is home to the nation's largest urban cultural green space, Balboa Park. Covering 1,200 acres, it features renowned performance venues, lush gardens, and a staggering 15 museums. But located in this serene setting is an institution dedicated to a decidedly noisy pursuit: the San Diego Automotive Museum. Inside, visitors can find a 1914 Ford Model T, a 1982 DeLorean, and a vast collection of Indian motorcycles. Most of these classic cars look like they've just rolled off the assembly line. But there's one vehicle here that's heavily customized.
The artifact is off-white, about 15 to 20 feet long, about 8,000 pounds. It has features that you're not going to find on a regular car.
According to Museum Executive Director Paula Brandis, these modifications greased the wheels for an incredible journey.
This amazing, one-of-a-kind car went on a one-of-a-kind adventure.
1947, San Diego, California. 36-year-old Louis Matar is a skilled auto mechanic with a vivid imagination.
Louis Matar was a very effervescent character. He loved tinkering with his cars.
Matar is obsessed with squeezing maximum performance out of his vehicles. So when he purchases a brand new Cadillac sedan, he gets a big idea.
Matar thought, how far can I go? How about New York and back? Without stopping.
Matar resolves to set the record for the longest non-stop drive. He plans to drive 6,300 miles without ever stopping. But the project poses a host of problems.
He had to consider fuel, water, oil, and you have to eat, you have to sleep, all of these things while you're driving down the highway.
And so to complete the epic journey, Matar resolves to modify nearly every inch of his Cadillac. He installs a larger fuel tank and plots a route that will allow him to gas up on the go.
He made arrangements to go to an airfield where a tanker could come alongside the car and refuel.
And just in case the Caddy gets a flat, Matar rigs the vehicle with a special contraption that will keep it rolling.
You can change the tires on this car while it's in motion.
Matar recruits 2 friends to be his co-pilots, allowing the 3 of them to switch off between driving and sleeping. And to make their journey as pleasant as possible, Matar puts in a few creature comforts.
Matar added a stove, a water fountain, a bar, a shower, a washing machine, a toilet, and of course, the kitchen sink.
He even installs the very latest in technology, making use of the nation's brand new wireless network.
Probably the most progressive thing he put in this car was a mobile telephone.
Finally, on September 20th, 1952, after 5 years of careful planning and $75,000 in upgrades, Matar and his pals hit the road.
The excitement level was pretty high. The first few days went very well. The car was working very well.
But then, despite their preparations, the team faces a problem they never anticipated. Matar and his buddies get sick.
The symptoms came on slowly. First it was headaches, then it was stomach cramps, and then constipation. They hadn't planned depend on that, so they didn't have any medicine to take care of it.
The men are in a bind. If they stop at a drugstore, their record-setting quest will skid to a halt. But if they don't, the problem could become too uncomfortable to ignore.
This was a big deal. They had their eye on the prize. They couldn't stop. They had to do something.
Is Matar's epic drive headed for a breakdown?
It's 1952. Mechanic Louis Matar is attempting a record-setting cross-country road trip in his souped-up Cadillac without ever stopping. But along the way, his team falls ill. So is this epic journey out of gas?
Luckily, Matar realizes he has just the right gadget to help them. His mobile phone.
He called the local police, told the police what the trouble was, and the police called a doctor who said, "Oh, I have just what they need, laxatives."
The officers pick up the medicine and meet them along the caddy's route.
They pulled up next to the car, rolled down the windows, and handed over the all-important medicine. The team was relieved.
Their troubles flushed away. Matar and his crew shift into high gear. On September 23rd, they arrive in New York City, make a speedy U-turn, and head back west. Finally, on September 27th, only 7 days after beginning their epic road trip, Matar and his buddies arrive back in San Diego.
Matar was euphoric. He did the unthinkable. He drove that car over 6,000 miles non-stop.
Today, Louis Matar's extraordinary 1947 modified Cadillac sits on display at the San Diego Automotive Museum. It's a motoring monument to a daring tinkerer who drove himself into the record books. Boston, Massachusetts boasts America's oldest public park, Boston Common. It was here that the colonial militia assembled during the American Revolution. But just a stone's throw from this green space is a more academic locale, the Boston Athenaeum. This library's stately reading rooms are decorated with an equestrian statue of George Washington, a portrait of President James Monroe, and a plaster bust of Benjamin Franklin. But tucked away in the archives is a simple document that reveals a surprising story about another American hero's life.
It's one paragraph in a very large sheet of paper. It's discolored a little bit with age, and if you look closely, you'll see one name in capital letters. It's pretty familiar to all of us. It's Paul Revere.
According to museum director Elizabeth Barker, this text describes a little-known chapter in the great American's life.
This founding father had a brief, bizarre, even macabre episode in the middle of his career.
What unique side of Paul Revere does this document reveal? 1768, Boston, Massachusetts. The British exert a tight control over every aspect of life in this New England city. And the colonists chafe at the idea of paying steep taxes to a distant monarch. One man finds the levies particularly irksome. 34-year-old silversmith Paul Revere.
Revere was arguably the greatest metal worker in colonial America. He made absolutely exquisite works of silver.
Revere pays heavy duties on the precious metals he needs to practice his trade, leaving him with little in the way of profits.
Business is drying up. He has to find a way to pay the bills.
To keep his family afloat, Revere takes up an unusual occupation. He becomes a dentist.
Paul Revere must have thought that people can forgo buying silver goods, but if they're in terrible, terrible pain, they will pay to have a tooth removed.
Revere's skills as a craftsman make him an unusually good dentist, and he finds no shortage of patients who rely on him to make false teeth and dentures.
As a metal worker, he was perfectly suited to create gold wires that were used to affix false teeth into the mouths of his clients.
Revere promotes his services in newspaper advertisements, like this one now stored at the Boston Athenaeum. And over the course of a few years, he treats hundreds of patients.
He was the best in the business.
But despite his flourishing practice, events just outside his door are about to upend his life. With tensions between the British and colonists reaching a fever pitch, Revere dedicates himself to the revolutionary cause. On April 18, 1775, his friend and former patient, General Joseph Warren, tells him of an impending attack by the British.
He received word from his friend that British troops were marching in the direction of Lexington, Massachusetts.
Revere sets off on horseback to warn the colonists that the British are coming.
The midnight ride of Paul Revere was vitally important for the American cause.
Before long, the first shots of the Revolutionary War are fired, and the American rebels suffer a brutal defeat at the Battle of Bunker Hill.
It was a horrific slaughter.
140 revolutionary soldiers are killed in the skirmish. The news hits New Englanders hard, perhaps none more so than Paul Revere, who learns that his dear friend, General Joseph Warren, was killed in the siege.
Revere was devastated by the death of his friend. Joseph Warren was an irreplaceable figure. He was a great statesman and a man of the people.
Determined to give Warren a proper burial, Revere heads to the battlefield to retrieve the general's corpse.
Revere must have felt a keen sense of duty for Warren's family to claim the dead.
But when Revere arrives at the site, he realizes his task will be next to impossible.
The sight that Paul Revere encountered must have been horrific. There were bodies compromised by scavenging animals and birds of prey.
The corpses have been so ravaged by the horrors of war that their faces are unrecognizable.
It was impossible to identify the bodies.
So how will Paul Revere find his friend?
It's 1776 in Massachusetts. Following a bloody siege, Paul Revere heads to the battlefield to find the body of his fallen compatriot, General Joseph Warren. But when Revere arrives, he's greeted by a horrific sight. The bodies of the dead have decayed beyond recognition. So how will this freedom rider find his friend?
Revere scours the battlefield for his comrade's body. Finally, he comes across something peculiar. A corpse with a piece of gold wire in his mouth.
Revere recognized that was a fine gold wire he had created for his clients.
But that isn't all Revere notices. The wire is attached to a false upper left tooth. Revere realizes that he once made such a tooth for Warren himself.
He knew that he'd found the correct body.
Thanks to Revere's positive identification, the general is given a proper military burial.
Revere must have felt honored that he was able to put his friend's body to rest.
And while Paul Revere is largely remembered for his famous midnight ride, his innovative method for identifying Warren's body gives him a rather unique place in the history books. He was the first American to identify a body using dental evidence.
He was effectively leading the CSI team for colonial America.
Today, dental records are frequently used by law enforcement to identify unrecognizable corpses. And this advertisement in the collection of the Boston Athenaeum recalls an American patriot's unusual career as a dentist and his forgotten legacy as a founding father of modern forensics. Located in the eastern half of the Netherlands, the village of Otterlo is known for its majestic national park. This 21 square mile preserve is nicknamed the Green Heart of the country. But it is also famous for a facility dedicated not to nature, but to art. The Kröller-Müller Museum. This elegant institution contains more than 11,000 works by such illustrious artists as Auguste Rodin, Georges Seurat, and Claude Monet. But among these recognizable pieces is one painting that was long shrouded in mystery.
It's 40 inches tall, 30 inches wide. The brush strokes are lush and they're circular. And it's been painted with oils. It's a beautiful bunch of flowers.
According to historian Catherine Cartwright, these vibrant brushstrokes baffled experts for decades.
Nobody could figure out who painted this beautiful work of art.
Who created this cryptic canvas? And what incredible secret does it conceal? The 1970s, Otterlo, the Netherlands. The Kröller-Müller Museum contains some of the finest paintings in the world. But among its vast collection is one 19th century work which has long intrigued curators. For a specific reason.
It's an enigma. Nobody knows who it's by.
Although the quality of the work appears masterful, no one knows the artist's identity. The museum is desperate to figure out who could have painted such an elegant canvas.
When you don't know who the artist is, it's almost as if you're wearing a nice dress and it doesn't have a designer label to it. Its value drops considerably.
Over the course of several years, the staff makes countless attempts to identify the artist, scanning the painting for clues and analyzing the canvas. But the efforts are in vain. With its authorship a mystery, the painting is kept in storage at the Kröller-Müller, where it goes largely unnoticed for decades.
It ends up hidden away where very few people get to appreciate it.
But in 2010, advances in technology finally present museum researchers an opportunity to reveal the artist's identity once and for all. The museum arranges for the painting to be scanned by an X-ray machine so advanced it can identify individual brushstrokes and even the types of pigments applied to the canvas.
The machinery is really specialized.
But when the results come in, they see something far more interesting than just colors.
There is another image beneath the flowers.
The painted image depicts two wrestlers dressed in loincloths. And it's this detail that stops museum staff in their tracks.
This was a huge clue.
During the late 19th century, most artists painted nude figures. But one art school from that period was notorious for requiring its models to wear clothing. The Royal Academy in Antwerp, Belgium.
The Royal Academy was known for being morally conservative. The students would have painted figures that were actually clothed.
And as the museum staff knows, one very famous artist attended that exact school. So who is the mysterious master?
It's 2010 in the Netherlands. For decades, the Kröller-Müller Museum has puzzled over the identity of the artist who created an exquisite 19th century painting. But when a high-tech X-ray reveals that there is in fact another image hidden beneath the oil paint, museum investigators trace the masterpiece to a Belgian art school. But little do they know, their revelation will stun the world.
Researchers discovered that in the 19th century, Belgium's Royal Academy was attended by an artist who would go on to become very famous. Vincent van Gogh. When museum staff pour through Van Gogh's letters and writings, they piece the entire story together. It's a tale that begins in 1886. Van Gogh was a poor art student at the Royal Academy. And it was there he was given an assignment to paint two sparring wrestlers. The artist was thrilled with the result.
It's a beautiful work of art.
But it seems that when it came time to start another piece, he faced a desperate choice.
He's really struggling to pay for food, let alone paints and canvases that he needs to get through his studies.
Lacking the money for more paint and supplies, Van Gogh painted over his original composition.
He just paints the flowers directly onto the wrestlers.
Thanks to the X-ray scans and letters, the museum staff is confident they've finally identified the painting's true artist.
The museum was absolutely thrilled to discover that this was a real Vincent van Gogh.
And today, this newly revealed Van Gogh at the Kröller-Müller Museum is viewed by countless art lovers who appreciate its beauty as well as the incredible secret beneath its surface. Wamego, Kansas is known for its distinctive 19th century Dutch windmill. But the town's main attraction is an institution that pays tribute to a true Kansas legacy, the Oz Museum. It houses over 2,000 pieces of Oz-related memorabilia, including original movie posters, actors' autographs, and props from the 1939 film. But perhaps the most treasured item here is the one that started it all.
It's 9 inches by 7 inches. On the front is a picture of a lion wearing spectacles, and the cover features red and green text that spells out The Wonderful Wizard of Oz.
This first edition is a celebrated masterpiece. But according to author Evan Schwartz, few realize that the story of its creation is just as winding as the Yellow Brick Road.
It's a series of misadventures that inspired one of the world's most famous adventures.
What is the real story behind The Wonderful Wizard of Oz? It's 1900. A new children's book is taking the nation by storm. Critics are calling it one of the most imaginative stories of all time. Its title is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The book tells the tale of a girl named Dorothy who is swept up in a tornado and finds herself in a bizarre land full of flying witches, talking animals, and teleporting footwear.
The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was an instant sensation. It became the first authentic American fairy tale.
The book's success spawns sequels, live stage shows, and other adaptations, including a blockbuster 1939 film. But what few realize is that this classic piece of Americana is shrouded in mystery. Its author, L. Frank Baum, was virtually unknown before the book's publication, leading many to wonder, how did this fledgling writer dream up such an incredible and creative story? Baum himself remains tight-lipped.
He didn't divulge where he got his story from.
Baum's reticence fuels speculation that there's more to this fantastical tale than just cowardly lions, munchkins, and an emerald city.
The book really sparked people's imaginations, that the story itself had another meaning.
According to one interpretation, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is a political commentary on the 19th century Depression, with the wizard representing the president and the munchkins the poor citizens of the day. Others believe the book is a religious allegory and that the Yellow Brick Road stands for the path to enlightenment. Yet another theory holds that since Dorothy and the witches are the only characters with power, Oz has an overt feminist message. But at the heart of the story is a harrowing tale known only to L. Frank Baum. So will he ever reveal it to the world?
Author L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz has dazzled readers for decades. The book is so popular that a host of theories have emerged about its true meaning. So what's the truth behind the story of the Wizard of Oz?
New evidence eventually comes to light that points to a unique source for the tale: Baum's own life. 1868, Peekskill, New York. L. Frank Baum is a young student at the Peekskill Military Academy. It's a campus with an unusual feature that may have inspired one of Oz's most memorable images.
There was a road that led right to the military academy, and it was paved with these bricks that were bright yellow in color. So if he asked someone for directions, where's the school, they would have said, follow the yellow brick road.
After graduating, Baum thinks he might like to try a career as a writer. But with a young wife and hopes of starting a family, he's forced to take a more practical path. And so he finds a job managing a theater. But his time with the stage is short-lived.
The theater caught fire, burned to the ground. It was just a devastating loss.
It's believed that this traumatic event is the inspiration behind one of Oz's most beloved characters, the Scarecrow.
The Scarecrow is made of straw. He says the only thing I am afraid of is a match.
After the fire, Baum finds employment as an oil salesman. For 5 years, he peddles cans of castorine oil, just like a rather crucial item for one of Dorothy's sidekicks.
We see the oil can show up as the iconic object that the Tin Man has in case he starts rusting.
In 1888, Baum learns of opportunities in the American West and leaps at the chance to move to the frontier. It's a barren, windswept landscape that resembles Dorothy's Kansas.
The world of Kansas is really inspired by Frank Baum's time in the Midwest. Tornadoes would rip across the land and wreak havoc.
Baum even observes a phenomenon that recalls the cyclone that whisked Dorothy to Oz.
At one point, he saw an entire house raise up and get thwacked back down on the ground.
Finally, in 1898, Baum decides to follow his true passion, writing. Drawing from all these experiences, he pens The Wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Baum recycled a lot of the imagery and the things that he saw into his storytelling. And that's part of what makes The Wizard of Oz so wonderful.
And today, this first edition on display at the Oz Museum in Wamego, Kansas, serves as a fascinating glimpse of the fantastical world of the man behind an American classic. Hyde Park, New York. Among this town's historic mansions is Springwood, the former home of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And set on its grounds is an institution that celebrates the 32nd president's legacy, the Franklin D. Roosevelt Presidential Library and Museum. On display are his wheelchair, his Oval Office desk, and his custom 1936 Ford Phaeton. But tucked away in the archives is a document that, although faded, played a crucial role in shaping the nation.
It's 8 inches wide, 11 inches long, and 2 pages. It's from June 16th, 1941. It includes a list of demands and a personal appeal to get the demands addressed.
According to historian David Lukander, these words reveal a forgotten struggle for justice that paved the way for one of the country's most inspiring moments.
This letter laid the groundwork for one of the most iconic events in American history.
1940, Washington, D.C. With World War II raging, the United States military knows it may have to join the conflict at any moment. In preparation, it builds tanks, aircraft, and weapons, fueling a massive nationwide hiring spree.
Hundreds of thousands of jobs were available in the defense industry. They were incredibly lucrative.
But not everyone is benefiting from the boom. Racial discrimination is rampant, and African Americans are excluded from the highest paid positions.
African Americans were confined to just the lowest paid and most unstable jobs.
But one man is determined to right this wrong, a labor leader named Asa Philip Randolph.
Randolph was a really savvy organizer and built a career as the voice of the African-American working class. He had unimpeachable dignity and poise and charisma.
Randolph knows that his only chance of changing the fortunes of his fellow African Americans is to get the attention of the Commander-in-Chief, President Franklin D. Roosevelt. To do so, Randolph plans something big: a march on Washington.
Randolph imagined that thousands of African Americans and their supporters would assemble in the Capitol. Randolph hoped that this would force the president's hand to act.
Randolph sets a date, July 1st, 1941. And in an effort to rally African Americans to join his demonstration, he spreads the word to unions across the country. Before long, more than 100,000 supporters sign up to attend.
People loved Randolph, and when he said we should do something, they responded.
Everything seems set for an event of historic proportions. But just weeks before the march, Randolph receives distressing news. According to reports, President Roosevelt is deeply concerned about the rally. He fears that with so many protesters, the event could get out of hand.
The president was very wary that conflicts between citizens and protesters could mushroom into a large-scale race riot.
Roosevelt is determined to stop the march. But Randolph is adamant that the demonstration be allowed to proceed.
Randolph sensed that this march had real power, and it's something that was galvanizing African Americans across the country.
Neither the president nor Randolph is willing to back down. It seems that a violent clash is inevitable. The situation is poised for disaster.
It's 1941, Washington, D.C. Civil rights leader A. Philip Randolph is planning a march on the Capitol to abolish discrimination in the defense industry. But President Roosevelt is determined to shut down the march, if necessary. With neither man backing down, it looks like they're headed for a violent clash.
Finally, at the 11th hour, Randolph writes an urgent letter to the president's most trusted advisor, Eleanor Roosevelt.
Randolph turned to Eleanor Roosevelt because she had her husband's ear and earned a reputation as a champion for the common person.
In the letter, the same one now at the FDR Presidential Library and Museum, Randolph asks Mrs. Roosevelt if she'll personally discuss the goals of the march with her husband. Sympathetic to the labor leader's concerns, she convinces FDR to talk with Randolph face to face.
This is the kind of meeting that only somebody like Eleanor could have put together.
On June 18th, just 2 weeks before the march is scheduled to take place, Randolph meets with the president at the White House. There, Randolph proposes a solution. He'll call off the march if FDR will take a decisive stand against racism. Roosevelt concedes and issues an executive order abolishing racial discrimination in the defense industry.
This executive order was a big deal because it's the first time a president had taken a pro-civil rights stand in generations. More African Americans found jobs in the defense industry after this policy was implemented.
But Randolph's fight doesn't end there. His vision of a peaceful demonstration for equality lives to see another day. In 1963, with the civil rights movement in full swing, Randolph organizes a massive event, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom.
A. Philip Randolph took a lead role in putting that event together. In fact, he even introduced Martin Luther King to the podium that day.
Today, Randolph's letter to Eleanor Roosevelt at the FDR Presidential Library and Museum recalls a determined leader who shaped one of American history's most important events. From alligators in the sewer to an unstoppable car, a hidden Van Gogh to the real Wizard of Oz.
I'm Don Wildman, and these are the mysteries at the museum.